But I continued visiting farms to document conditions, and here's some of the photos I took over the years. On the upper left-hand corner, that's a dumpster full of the dead and dying male chicks born at a hatchery that hatch egg-laying hens. In the poultry business today, there are two distinct breeds of chickens. There are the meat-type birds that are bred to grow twice as big and twice as fast as normal to reach slaughter weight at just like 6 weeks old. They grow very fast, very large. Their hearts and lungs often have difficulty supporting that growth rate, and they'll die of heart attacks at just a couple weeks old in many cases. The picture at the upper right is egg-laying chickens in battery cages. These are wire cages that are lined up in rows, stacked in tiers, in huge factory warehouses that'll commonly hold about 100,000 birds. The birds are packed so tightly they can't even stretch their wings. Their feathers wear off. They have bruises and abrasions on their bodies, and they live this way for about a year. The lower left-hand corner is a picture of dairy cows in a milking parlor. And many people who care about animals and want to make a difference choose not to eat animals, which is very logical. But it's also important to recognize that cows who are exploited for milk and chickens who are exploited for eggs suffer. And there are other consequences of those industries, such as the male chicks that are thrown away in the dumpster in the upper left-hand corner. I should have mentioned that the egg-laying hens have been genetically bred to lay eggs. So the males do not grow fast enough to be raised profitably for meat, so they're thrown away, which is why they're in that dumpster. In the lower left, again, is the dairy cow in the milking parlor. In order for them to produce milk at a profitable level, they have to be impregnated and give birth every year. And they have a 9-month gestation period. So that is a very intense strain on their bodies, especially when you consider they're producing 10 times more milk than they would produce in nature. They're in what the industry calls a state of negative energy balance. They cannot eat enough to keep the weight on their bones. So the average year in the life of a dairy cow would be something like on January 1st, she gives birth. The baby is taken away, and then she goes into the milk stream a couple days later because they milk the colostrum out, and then she is hooked up to milk machines 2 or 3 times a day, and they pump all the milk out of her when they hook those up. I remember talking to some dairy people, and they described the cow's udder like a battery, that you have to suck it dry and then it will fill all the way up again. And so this is done to maximize milk production. About 3 months into her lactation cycle, she's re-impregnated because she's got to give birth again in about a year. So now for the next 7 months, she's giving milk at this intense level, and she's pregnant. Then 2 months before giving birth again, they stop milking her so she can be reconditioned, so she can put weight back on her body, so that when she gives birth again, she can get back into the same cycle of being milked at such an intensive level and then being impregnated again. So this is a year in the life of a dairy cow. And in a natural environment, dairy cows could live 20 years, but on modern dairy farms, they're sent to slaughter after just about 3 years in production because their bodies are so worn out. And in fact, most of the ground beef in the US comes from dairy cows. And the picture at the lower right is of pigs in gestation crates. These are 2-foot wide metal enclosures where these animals live for most of their lives, unable even to turn around. Right before giving birth, they move them into a farrowing crate, which is also a 2-foot wide enclosure for the mother, but there's some additional space on the side for the piglets, so that when the mother lays down on her side, the piglets can nurse through the bars. And they're kept this way for about 3 weeks, and then the babies are taken away to be fattened for slaughter. They're killed at 6 months old. The mothers are re-impregnated, put right back into the gestation crate. So they live this constant cycle of impregnation, birth, and re-impregnation, going back and forth between the gestation crate and the farrowing crate. So these are some of the industries that produce our meat, milk, and eggs. These are some of the conditions, and most people are unwittingly supporting this. And it's because we grow up with habits and we don't think very much about our food or the consequences of our food choices. The good news is we can make choices not to support this and to create a different kind of world. Whoops. And so this is a picture of our sanctuary in Northern California. And when you visit Farm Sanctuary, the experience is very different than when you visit these factory farms. When you go into a gestation crate shed, for example, you hear the pigs clanking against the bars, screaming to get out. The air is thick with toxic fumes. It's a stressful place to be for the animals and for people. And you contrast that with visiting the sanctuary, where animals get to enjoy their lives. And we also get to enjoy their lives. And, it does our heart good to see sheep out grazing or calves in the spring kicking up their heels, running out when it's warm again, chickens scratching in the dirt or perching. And, this is something that is good for the animals, and just being around them in that environment is good for us, which is a stark contrast from what happens on the factory farms. The animals at Farm Sanctuary are our friends, not our food. And I think this kind of relationship is mutually beneficial, as opposed to where we are exploiting and confining these animals and then ultimately killing them. That is clearly not good for the animals, and I would also suggest it's not good for us. So in the book, Living the Farm Sanctuary Life, we outline 5 tenets for living the farm sanctuary life. The first being to live and eat in alignment with your values. Most people are humane. Most people don't like cruelty. Most people are appalled to see what happens on factory farms. And most people are unwittingly supporting that industry. So there's this disconnect between our compassionate values and our humanity and our behavior. And if we can align those, I think we'll see a massive shift. And this sort of speaks to the emotional challenges we face, because most people are humane and don't want to support cruelty, but most people are supporting cruelty. And so when the issue of factory farming or animal slaughter comes up, people so often say, "Don't tell me, I don't want to know. It's too upsetting," because there's this massive disconnect. And as vegans, we, I think, tend to remind people of that disconnect. And so there's oftentimes in social situations, challenging interactions. I think it's important for us as vegans to be mindful of the fact that people are imperfect, including ourselves. Even the most vegan is not perfect. And also recognize that most people want to do better and want to live well and want to live compassionately. And so giving people tools and encouragement and support for any step they take in a positive direction is, I think, an effective way to create change. And in the vegan movement, and again, I've been a vegan since 1985, I think we have learned that wagging the finger doesn't work very well. And this is a process we're all in the midst of as human beings. We're learning, we're trying to do better. And I think our food choices have profound consequences that most people don't think about, and to the extent we can help people think about those, and then to live in a way that is aligned with their values, that they can feel good about. And instead of saying, "Don't tell me, I don't want to know," people can say, "I know where my food comes from, and I feel good about it."